I call James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and take a call on the Electoral Adjustment of Thresholds Amendment Bill. So this bill aims to do a number of things which came up during the MMP review conducted by the Electoral Commission in 2012. And the Green Party was at the time, we really supported the review and noted that it was a government review that was brought about because of its own coalition agreement. And while the Green Party has a electoral reform plan and a set of policies that are different in some part from the recommendations that the Electoral Commission came up with, we said that we would support the changes that were recommended by the Electoral Commission because they were changes recommended by the Electoral Commission. So they had done a great deal of work. They'd taken submissions. I personally submitted on that. They took a great deal of time and thorough consideration to arrive at the conclusions that they did. And the proposals that they made, whether or not we actually disagreed with them, were ones that were well considered by the Electoral Commission and then were completely shelved by this government because they were inconvenient to this government's short-term interests. So that was unfortunate. It was unfortunate that we wasted the resources and the time of the Electoral Commission. It was unfortunate that we spent the money on that review and then did precisely nothing with it. So for those reasons, we support Ian Lees-Galloway's bill because it does actually advance at least some of the recommendations that were outlined in the Electoral Commission review. So the three main recommendations were to remove the one electorate seat threshold, to lower the party vote threshold to 4% and review the party vote threshold after 3 general elections. And I just wanted to respond to some of the points raised by the previous speaker, John O'Naylor, where he was kicking around a number of other options, which I'm sure the Electoral Commission did consider as they were moving through their deliberations. And given that they deliberated on those and then chose the recommendations that it did, I don't think that it's kind of helpful now to kick around, a whole bunch of other things that have already been considered. So we do support this bill. We think that the most important part here is, and the reason why we supported this one at the time is that public opinion and faith in the MMP system is degraded by the presence of the one-seat rule. And we recognise that that's not convenient necessarily to all of the parties in this House, but there is a sort of a greater need here, I think, which is the requirement for integrity in the system and a sense of public faith that the system is a good one. And at least has the perception of fairness, although I note, as Mr. Naylor said, that that can be a relative thing. So it's pretty apparent that a significant portion of New Zealand voters consider that the one-seat threshold is a rort. The media keep using the same thing, when talking about, for example, Epsom and Oharu. They refer to those two cases as really kind of examples of how political parties undermine the overall system and use it to. I'm just reporting what people say, Chris. That they use that to sort of undermine and get around the electoral system. So I think that and we know that this bill is not going to be supported by the government for the same reason that the Electoral Commission's report and recommendations were also not supported by the government. But if they were, then that would restore some level of faith or increased faith in MMP. So it would be great if this issue didn't have to come up via a members' bill. It would have been better that if the Justice and Electoral Select Committee took another look at those recommendations, and because it is always going. Anytime you change the electoral system, it is going to have winners and losers in terms of the MPs and parties that are in Parliament. then one option would be to grandfather this bill out so that it takes effect in 2 or 3 elections' time, so that current MPs and parties are not,
Honourable member's time has expired.